CBC News Network is a Canadian English-language news channel owned and operated by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It broadcasts into over 10 million homes in Canada, and is a Category C specialty channel. It is the world's third oldest television service of this nature, after CNN in the United States and Sky News in the United Kingdom. CBC News Network's French-language counterpart is Ici RDI, also owned by the CBC. Revenue. According to the Canadian Communications Monitoring Report, Broadcasting System 2014, there are 11.3 million subscribers and revenue of $86.7 million. History. With CNN already being widely available in Canada, during the 1980s both private and public Canadian broadcasters began to apply for a license for a similar 24-hour news service in Canada. In 1987 the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission awarded a license to the CBC. Its initial launch was delayed several times. First when Telecom, who had filed a competing application for an all-news channel, chose to appeal the CRTC decision. Second, when the federal cabinet issued a directive to the CBC to revise its service plan for the network to include private commercial broadcasters and to launch a parallel French-language service. And finally when cable companies were reluctant to add the service just 5 months after a similar launch of numerous other channels. CBC News World finally began broadcasting on July 31, 1989. The network originally broadcast from several regional studios in Halifax, Toronto, Winnipeg and Calgary. However, budget cuts over the years eventually forced the network to centralize most of its operations in Toronto and Calgary. It is funded by cable subscriber fees and commercial advertising. Unlike the CBC's main television network, the channel cannot directly receive operational funds from the corporation's public funding allotment, although it does benefit from synergies with other CBC services, such as the ability to share reporters and programs with the main network. In the 1990s, the channel also aired repeats of CBC Television's political sketch comedy series This Hour Has 22 Minutes and Royal Canadian Air Farce, but these were discontinued in 2001 after a CRTC directive that the shows did not qualify as news programming. While sometimes thought to be a mandatory basic cable channel, there are in fact a number of cable systems, owned at the time by Persona, that did not carry CBC News Network at all during much of the 2000s. The channel was dropped by these systems in 2000 due to a fee dispute between Persona and the CBC. The channel is believed to have since returned to most of these systems. News World International. Some of CBC News Network's programming also aired on the now-defunct News World International, a former American cable news network co-owned by the CBC and the Power Corporation of Canada. CBC News World produced some programming for News World International and scheduled programming from other news networks like BBC World, which did not air on the Canadian channel. News World International was sold to USA Networks in 2000, then to Vivendi Universal in 2001, and then to Al Gore and Joel Hyatt in 2004. News World continued to provide the network's programming until Gore and Hyatt launched their own network, Current TV, on August 1, 2005. In 2013, the channel was sold again to the Al Jazeera Media Network and ultimately became Al Jazeera America on August 20, 2013. 2009 relaunch. On October 21, 2009, it was announced that CBC News World would be rebranded as CBC News Network on October 26 as part of a larger relaunch of the CBC News division. A new lineup of programs was introduced to the network, with a greater emphasis towards live news coverage. New programs included CBC News Now, Power and Amp, Politics, The Lang and O'Leary Exchange in Connect with Mark Gully. CBC News Network HD. In January 2009, the CBC launched an HD simulcast of CBC News Network, originally called CBC News World HD. The channel was renamed CBC News Network HD on October 26, 2009 to coincide with the rebranding of CBC News World to CBC News Network. The HD feed has been confirmed at 720p resolution on Shaw Cable after it was added to the lineup in 2014. It is currently available through all major TV providers. Programming. CBC News Network originally aired a number of magazine-style programs, along with hourly news updates. In recent years, the network has moved from that style of programming to focusing solely on live news programs and documentary programs, including The Passionate and Rough Cuts, both formerly hosted by Mikhail Jean, and Politics, a political affairs program which was hosted by Don Newman and aired twice daily. The Hour with George Stroumboulopoulos was launched in 2005 in an attempt to attract younger viewers. Similar news-oriented talk shows, such as Pamela Wallin Live, Counterspin, Face Off and Ben Mergui Live, also aired on the network in the 1990s. The network's daytime schedule consists of the rolling newscasts CBC News Now, which airs from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays and 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekends. Instead of producing a separate morning news and noon-hour program, most CBC television stations simulcast CBC News Now from 6 to 7 a.m. and 12 to 1 p.m. local time. Power and Amp Politics airs from 5 to 7 p.m., followed by the business news program The Exchange from 7 to 8 p.m. An evening edition of CBC News Now, anchored by Ian Hanno-Mansing, airs at 8 p.m., and a simulcast of the Atlantic Canadian edition of The National airs from 9 to 10 p.m. From 10 p.m. until the first edition of CBC News Now the following morning. The schedule consists of repeat airings of CBC News and documentary programs. Anchors: current Peter Armstrong, Rosemary Barton, Jennifer Hall, Ian Hanno-Mansing, Heather Hiscox, Colleen Jones, Carol McNeil, Suhana Mahashon, Reshmi Nair, Andrew Nichols, Scott Peterson, Michael Serapio, past Dave Brindle, Kim Brunhuber, now with The National, Bill Cameron, deceased, Harry Forrestal, now host of CBC News, New Brunswick, Dawna Friesen, now with Global National, Tom Harrington, Mikhail Jean, now former Governor-General of Canada, Mark Gully, Neil Coxall, now CBC Toronto weekend host, Amanda Lang, Anne-Marie Medwake, Geordie Morgan, current Progressive Conservative Party of Nova Scotia Metro organizer, Don Newman, retired, Ann Petrie, Kathleen Petty, current Ottawa morning host on CBC Radio Ottawa, Lorne Saxberg, died in snorkeling accident in Thailand, Sarika Setigal, Alison Smith, current co-anchor with Bernie McNamee of CBC Radio 1's The World at 6, Evan Solomon, George Stroumboulopoulos, current the host of George Stroumboulopoulos Tonight on CBC Television, Sheldon Turcotte, Nancy Wilson, logos.